Hi, in this video we are going to see how to create report card templates in Additio App. When we are in Additio Center, we need to go to the menu and click on Report Cards Templates. Here we will see all the templates that we already have, and we can create a new one by clicking on the plus symbol. Here we will put the title, for example, Report Card Final Grades, and click on Save. And now we get a new page where we can personalize and customize the template that we are going to create. On the left side, we see that there are a lot of widgets that we can use, and the way it works is we need to drag and drop these widgets onto the page. And then in the left side, we see that there is an editor. So every kind of widget that we have here will be able to be edited with this editor. And then we have the data source, which we will talk about that in a few minutes. Here we also see that we can duplicate pages or add new pages, and then we can also add a space in the same page. So let's start creating our first template. We will start with all these widgets, explaining all of them one by one. Let's work first with the text title. So here we can drag and drop this onto the template, and then we will see that there are many options. For the text, we have title, text, and rich text. The title allows us to create titles, headlines, or any kind of titles or subtitles that we want to work with. And then here in the editor, we can see that we can choose many options to customize this title. For example, we can change the font family to any of these fonts that we have here. Then we can also choose the title style from these ones. And we can also choose the font size, for example, up until 24. And then here, where it says title content, we can actually write the content of this title. For example, final grades. And then we can also change the color of the title. We have these colors, but also the whole palette. So we can choose whatever color we want to choose, for example, from our school. And then we can also change the fill color, the border color, if it has a border. We can have random corners if we have a border, and so on. We can also have different text styles from these ones and different alignments. So now, for example, let's put this title and let's put it here. Continuing with the text types that we have, here we also have text and rich text. They work in a similar way, however, they have quite some differences. If we put the text here, for example, it works the same as the title. So we have many editing options here, and then here we can change the text. For example, if we wanted to put the name of the student, and then if we right click into the component, we can duplicate components. And for example, here we can have the surname of the student. That way we can edit this type of text. But we also have the rich text. This means that whenever we use a rich text, we can edit all this component in the same component. So if we click on edit, here we have that many options to personalize that. So we have different font sizes, we can have bold text, italic text, we can use bulleted list, we can have different colors, we can link the data source here. So we will see that in a few minutes, but we also have this option because this is more customizable and more adapted to your needs. As you can see, now here we have a general text for the name and the surname of the student. However, later we will see how we can connect this to the data source. So any kind of data that we have in our school, for example, a student's name, a student's surname, the name of the school, or whatever we have already in our school, we can be linked here so that every student will have customized information in their own report. So, following up with the different widgets that we have, let's go on to the image section. Here we have different options. When we drag and drop an image, here when we click on it, we see that we can add whether it is an image that we have in our laptop, for example, on our phone. And then we can also add the school's logo if we have it in our school. If we click here, for example, we will have the school logo, so we can easily access it and we can add it to the report card if we want to. We also have a student image. So here, if students in the base groups, they have in their profile a photo, it will appear in the report card. So we can also add that if we want to. If we want to separate different kinds of information or we want to add some forms, we have here some kind of widget that we can use. We have a division line, which means that we can add a line, for example, to separate different contents. For example, we will separate the student information from the actual grades. And then we also have a rectangle, for example, where we can use, for example, to group different kinds of information or whatever we want to do. So this is fully customizable and adapted to the school's need. Now imagine that after writing down all the information from the students, we want to write down all the information from their grades. We will use these tables and different charts that we have here. Starting with the tables, for example, we first will add a title and we will put, for example, this is final grades. Now here we can add the table. We have two tables. We have a marks table and a free table. They work quite similarly as the text and rich text. This means that the marks table, we can use that and we can edit that and personalize that with our editor. And then the free table works quite similarly, but instead of working with the editor on the right, we can work with all the data inside the same table. And we have all these ways of customizing the table the same way that we did with the rich text. So now I'm going to delete that and I'm going to use only the marks table so you can see how it works. So here we can customize everything that we want to customize. For example, we can customize the colors of the text, of the border, or whatever. We can choose how many columns and rows we want. However, if we then have more columns and more rows, it doesn't matter because the system will add them if we need them. And then we can also change the header size, the font size, or whatever. Here we can also add, which is really interesting, the averages. So we can have a column of averages and also a row of averages. So this make it easier for you to do these calculations. So if you want to, you can add that. Now we won't add that, and here we have this table. Later, we will see how we connect this table with the grade that we already had thanks to the data source. So stay for a moment and now let's see the next thing, which is an evaluation target. Imagine that you want to show a student and their parent how they have been doing in different skills. We can add first a title, for example, it will say evaluation target, and then we can add an evaluation target into our report. And here, as we said, we can personalize and customize different things, such as colors. We can show or not the legend. We can also change different types of things. And then we will connect that to our data source so that it represents what actually the students have achieved in class. And to finish this template that we are creating, we will add a tutor's comment. So every student in the report card will get a customized comment from the tutor. So to do that, we will, for example, add a rich text. Here, we will add a rich text and we can work on this text in the same widget. So we will add tutor's comment. And then here we can customize different things, such for example, using bold text. And now we will see how to connect all these things that we have created in this template to the data source. Now comes a really important part, which is once we have our template finished, so this is the template that we are going to use, how do we connect all these different things, for example, the name, the surname, the different grades, so that is connected to every student? So, and that's what we are going to do now with the data source. If we click on the pencil, we will be able to edit the different data that we want. Here we have some data that is already in our school, but we can add more data that we don't have, but that we want for this template. Here we will select the data that we have that we want to use for this template. For example, we want to use the name and the address of the school. And then, for example, in the student data, we want to use the surname, the name, and for example, all this information, we don't need that. But for example, we need a comment for every student. So we will add a group, which will be the comment, and we will add an item, which will be the tutor's comment, and it will be specific text for the student. If it was a general text from the tutor for all students, for the whole group, we will use a common text for all students. However, in this case, since every student will get their own comment, it will be specific text per student. And then here in the data for graphs and tables, we will need to add a group for every table and every graph that we have created. So, for example, we know we have a table, so we will say evaluation table, for example, and here we will add the different items that we want to work with. For example, in our table, we will have a column which will be the subject, which will be as common text for all students because all students study subjects. And then we have the final grade, for example, which will be a number. And then we have, for example, a comment from the teacher, which will be a specific text for a student. And then we have created an evaluation target. So we will add a new group, which will be the evaluation target. And here, the different items will be the different skills. For example, digital skills, then social skills, or whatever skills you work with in your curriculum. And here we will say that it's a number. Once we do that, let's click on Save, and we already have all the data source here. Now that we have chosen all the data that we want to work with in this template, we need to link all these different widgets to the data. So for example, we click on this text, and once we click, the data source opens and asks us what kind of data we want to put here. So here it's the name of the student. So we want to link that to the name of the student that we have in the student data. The same with the surname. And then, for example, here in the name of the school, we can say that we want to work with the name of the school. Here, instead of working with the data source widget that we have on the right side, we work inside the same widget. So we click on link dataset, and then we can choose the data from here. For example, general data, name of the center. And here, the same thing with the address. It's general data, address of the center. And we click OK, and we already have the data connected. The same with the table. When we click on the table, we can link this data with the data source. So here we can say that in this table is related to our evaluation table that we have created, and then we can click this configuration wheel that we have here. Once we click here, we choose that we want to work with columns, and then we say that what each column is. For example, the first column is the subject, the second column will be the grade of each subject, and then the third column will be the comment from the teacher. We click on Save, and then now we don't see that, but then this will be connected for every student. And then for the evaluation target, same process. We go to a data source and we select that we are working with the evaluation target group that we have created. And here, when we create the report card for every student, we will see the actual target. And then for the tutor's comment, since this is a rich text component, we will link the dataset here. So we click link dataset and we select that it's a student data comment, tutor's comment, and here will appear the comment. Once we have that, we save, which is really important if we don't want to lose any kind of progress. And now we will see how we can see that in the base groups. In order to apply that to the base groups, we need to go to base group cohorts and then go, for example, to this group and click on the three dots, reports, report cards. Here we will create a report card for this template. I have this here, and then we will see that the template has adapted to every of the students. For example, Michelle, we have her name, her surname. We also have her grade, her evaluation target, and her comment. So this is how you can see the final template applied to the base groups.